You just have opportunity.
Right, exactly. Right.
Alex,
Good morning.
are you ready?
No, I
there,
didn't.
Alex?
We're in executive session.
Have
Oh.
Mr. Stork on the phone?
Send an email, please.
Stork on.
Okay.
We have.
I have to keep an eye on.
Yes.
You're good on the,
Did Dan
side.
come in?
Yes, ma'am, we're good.
Okay,
Good morning.
good morning. I'm different.
Seconds.
Yeah, we're neighbors. Then we have Monica. Yes.
Good.
The southern part here, down the line. Staff ready?
Yes. You guys are ready? Ready? Let's, how are you?
All right, good morning.
Morning.
Gonna call the February 16th, 2024 VRE Operations Board meeting to order. If everyone that is able could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Bagley?
Here.
Ms. Bailey? Here. Ms. Bonke?
Here.
Ms. Franklin? Ms. Gary? Here. Mr. Gordy?
Here.
Ms. Hayes?
Here.
Holmes?
Here.
Mr. Carantonis?
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin? Ms. Mensing? Here. Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Stork?
Present.
And Mr. Walkinshaw?
Here.
And Madam Chair,
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Stork has requested to participate in the meeting remotely because he is currently on vacation in Mexico. There there being a quorum physically present, do I have a motion and a second to allow Mr. Stork to participate electronically? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, Rich, do we have a safety moment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, we have made assignments, but just so you know, myself will take care of AED, CPR. John's going to be the primary. I'll be the backup. We do have, let's see, Dallas Richards in the back will be primary 911. Chris Henry will be his backup. And I think, Dallas, you have your running shoes on today, right? So, or excuse me, let's get somebody else. Anaya, you got your running shoes on. That'd be great. That'd be great. So we do need to get first responders up here in the room. Anaya will go down and meet up with the security guard and lead them up this way. Taking a walk around the facility. We've got good, clear primary and secondary exits if we needed to use those for any evacuation purposes. And as I just said, we have staff assignments. I just, as a note, appreciate everybody last month slugging their way through the snow and stuff to get to the meeting, those that were able to show up. We did assign certain staff members to make sure you didn't snow during this meeting. They were able to get pushed off. my warning to you is that we are expected to get some weather in the region tonight. And so just be conscious of that. Various forecasts in various areas and stuff like that. So all in the name of safety, just want to be aware of your surroundings and particularly this time of year of impending weather. So that's my safety moment, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Rich. Okay, do we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we are going to approve the minutes from the December 15th Operations Board meeting, and then also the minutes from our January 29th, 2024, our special all virtual meeting that lasted all of about 6 or 7 minutes. So we need to approve these minutes. Do I have a motion? Thank you. And any discussion on the minutes? Any changes or revisions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries. Let's see. Just want to say welcome to everybody. We do have some new board members here. And if it's okay with everybody, because we have some new faces, if we could all just go around the room again and just state your name and which jurisdiction you represent. I think that's always helpful because they get to hear your voice and look at you and say, okay, Takis is with. So I'll start with you, Sarah.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Bagley. I'm on the City Council for the City of Alexandria.
Ralph Smith, City Council, Manassas.
Good morning, I'm James Walkinshaw. I represent the Braddock District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors.
Good morning, Takis Karantonis, the Arlington County Board.
Alana Mensing, I'm Vice Mayor in the City of Manassas Park.
I'm Tom Gordy. I represent the end of the line, the Manassas line in the Brentsville District, Prince William County.
Hi, I'm Janin Holmes and I represent Fredericksburg City at large. Lori Hayes, I represent the Lee Hill District of Spotsylvania.
I'm Monica Carey, Aquia District in Stafford County.
Andrea Bailey represents the Potomac District in Prince William County.
And Meg Baumke, I represent the Falmouth District in Stafford County. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for being here today. I do want to remind everyone that
Meg.
Oh,
Madam
and
Chair.
Dan, thank you. Go ahead, please.
I'm Dan Stucker, represent the Mount Vernon District of Fairfax County, and welcome and look forward to meeting at our next visit, our next meeting. Thank you.
Dan has a great bike ride through Mount Vernon every year. He'll keep us tuned in on that. And speaking of Dan, Dan is the chair of the Finance Committee, and he will be with us today leading the charge after our board meeting for the Finance Committee meeting. And I just want to mention that I do have a few other supervisors and city council people that have come forward to serve on the committees. So we'll have a revised list at our next meeting. If there's anything that and you can serve on more than one. I know our new board members, Mr. Gordy and Ms. Holmes, are thinking about what they want to do. But anyway, anybody is invited to come to our meeting today. Even the public. So we'll have that meeting, and I appreciate everybody signing up to sit on other committees. VRE is going to have a float at the Greater Manassas St. Patrick's Day Parade along Center Street in historic downtown Manassas. That is scheduled on Saturday, March 9th from 11 to 12. So we would love to have some attendance there and see our VRE float. I think I've already addressed that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rich for his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Start right off with safety. I did want to report that an action that the Ops Board took later part of last year awarded a new safety or security contract to Allied Security Services for our Broad Run and Crossroads Maintenance and Storage Facility and our LaFont midday storage facility. That company took over about the first week of January, have made made a transition. It's gone very well, but I did want to point out one of the things that Allied Securities has brought with them is some technology. And specifically, they have a customized information platform that does a lot of different things for them in the safety and security world. Some of us, for those that are familiar with the facilities, as a lot of you are, they're fairly, particularly Crossroads, quite expansive and stuff like that. But and there are very regimented things that this security team does. They do very specific checks, so on and so forth. But again, I just want to highlight the fact that, they brought some technology with them. It's an enhancement from what we previously had. But more importantly, just to announce that team is off and running at our maintenance and storage facilities. So that's the safety section. Did want to report, obviously, on-time performance, still hovering in that mid-80s for the month of January. We did hit 86%. We'll say that that's still slightly below our target of 90%. And the next couple of slides just summarize at a high level. You okay there, Alex?
Safety first.
Wanted to. Our average delay minutes for those late trains are, they're not extensive, but, obviously we strive for a greater than 90% on-time performance for the entire system. A little breakdown here. Again, this is for the month of January. Still, congestion is the highest. And it's in previous months, I've often articulated congestion and primarily out of Washington Union Terminal. That mixture's changed a little bit. We are seeing better, particularly in the month of January, better performance out of Washington Union Terminal, but congestion caught us in some other areas as well. So just wanted to highlight that. Monthly ridership for the month, obviously well above our December numbers. Average daily ridership for the month of January for a 20-day service month. It's actually the second highest we've had in the last 12 months. So it's ticking back up in the right direction, particularly after the holiday season and stuff like that. So it's going in the right direction. I did want to point, I didn't see, did Christian make it? I'm looking at the staff at the back. Okay, well.
Christine or Kristen?
Christian.
Christian. Oh, sorry. Christian.
So Christian was going to try to make it here, but nonetheless, just want to introduce a new staff member, Christian Adoma. He joined our accounting and finance team as a senior associate accountant. If you remember in December, I had indicated to you we did have a staff member retire, and so Christian's come in and will fill that role. Christian comes to us. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from George Mason and over 13 years of accounting experience, tax advisory experience, and of course, because food is the lifeblood of our staff, if you will. We're glad to say that he did come to us from the corporate headquarters of Five Guys. So not saying that was the sole purpose that edged him out, but no, we're really glad to have a Christian on board. Great guy, and I'll get him to a meeting and make sure that you guys get a chance to meet him. And then I do have one last comment. I just wanted to let folks know that we did do a briefing last month, sort of an update on our system plan. Just wanted you to know that the system plan team is out, or will be out in earnest, doing additional rounds of public comment, public participation, those different elements. That team will be back again in March for yet another update and some refinement there. So the work there continues on our updated system plan. That is my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate all those comments. Okay, now we're moving on to our Virginia Railway Express riders and public comment. VRE accepts public comments both in person and electronically via the VRE website. Members of the public wishing to make public comments have 3 minutes and should state their full name and the jurisdiction they live in. And written comments submitted before 8 a.m. this morning will be forwarded to the members of the board and attached to the official minutes. Do we have any members of the public here who would like to address the board? Madam Clerk, do we have any electronically submitted comments?
Madam Chair, we had one which was forwarded, came in late this morning and was forwarded to the members.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, and we have no one here from the public that would like to speak. All right, seeing none, we're going to move down to our action items. We have 5 action items today. The first one is authorization to execute a sole source contract for locomotive data recording system video upgrades. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, the authorization we seek, as you see in the recommendation, is to Wabtec Railway Electronics for locomotive data recording systems in the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency for a total amount not to exceed $874,817. Just quickly in the summary, we do have a current video recording. There's some audible recording on board both our locomotives and our cab control cars. And if you want to just kind of visualize that, that's basically whatever the engineer can see out in front of them gets recorded in both the locomotives and cab control cars. For some of you that have been on our system tour, you've seen that, or at least seen those cameras and stuff. So we installed the system originally back in 2015, along with our PTC system. The current system, there's some enhancements out there, but more specifically, the FAST Act actually implemented some enhanced regulations for us, which are in the areas of improving crash hardened memory, recording times, and some other things. So anyway, the authorization that we seek is with the OEM of that original system. And so that means that we don't have to go back and rewire systems and all that type of stuff. But nonetheless, the enhancement will meet the current requirements in the FAST Act. Those requirements, and I'll just state, we want to get ahead of this a little bit, get our orders in. The requirements aren't due until next year, but there's some pretty long lead times on this equipment. So again, we want to get out there and get the purchase made. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Rich?
Sure.
Yes, Akis.
Rich, thank you for that. So if this wasn't for the FAST Act, we would have to replace them anyway or to update them anyway.
I will say that we may have delayed a year, maybe 2 years or something like that. But the FAST Act, particularly with the enhanced crash hardened memory requirements, is really driving us to do it a little sooner. The rest of the system, like I said, it's matured in terms of speed, recording ability, and stuff like that. We would have naturally wanted to, capture those enhancements as well. But to some degree, this is being a little accelerated, but this technology is about 10 years old. So
I agree, and I'm seeing everywhere the growing desire to record basically everything, both inside, outside, and for safety and not safety of the passenger, safety of the vehicle, safety of the system reasons. And I see that's a sole source contract, so that's still not apparently not the competitive market for that, right?
The sole source primarily is because we have an OEM of an existing system, and this is just an enhancement to that. We could go competitively procure this, but that would mean that that we would have to change the entire system out. So, and again, this sole source justification does meet, you know, the state and federal requirements for a sole source procurement such as this. So it fits right into those requirements as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your, do we need to do roll call vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have Mr. Stork saying aye. That motion carries unanimously. All right, moving on to item B, authorization to execute a contract amendment for construction of the Fredericksburg Station Rehabilitation Project. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this authorization we seek is with Clark Construction Group for the amount stated in the recommendation plus a contingency for a total amount, or essentially increase the total amount of the current contract not to exceed $10,132,071. I'll unpack a couple of things here for you. As you recall, back in October, a companion contract with this project for construction management. I brought that to you to basically increase their contract authorization as well, primarily because of some time extensions, because of additional work, and the need for additional additional resources from that construction management team. This item here is specifically for the construction piece of that. And as we talked a little bit about in October, of course, as we got into this project and, when we originally set up the bid, the analysis was, and not unlike other projects of this nature, was non-destructive in nature. We were doing a lot of, estimating, but good estimates and stuff. Obviously, once you get into construction and you actually start, and I think I introduced the term scarfing. You start pulling away the concrete, the repaired areas and stuff like that. And some, through some penetrant testing, where we thought maybe we needed to replace 4 inches. Some of it became 6 inches, 8 inches anyway. So what we're doing here, or what I'm requesting here, is basically a contract amendment. The amount stated here. And I want to break this down just a little bit more for you. So we are nearing the end of this project, substantial completion within the next couple of months, and so we do have some elements of current requests for changes at the tune of about $520,000 that have been negotiated and or very near completed with negotiation. We have about $467,000 of requests for changes that we're currently negotiating. And then towards the end of that, one of the major elements left in this project is Sophia Street. And that's arguably was the worst, if you will, from a need of repair. And we're not quite finished with that. So what I'm seeking from you is the authorization to increase the contract authorization. But I will say, two things. If given this contract authorization, we won't be back, or I won't be back. And it's likely that the total contract value will come in under what we're requesting here. So I'm right there in that throes where we're negotiating some requests for changes. We still have some unseen stuff, but it's going to go quickly here in the next couple of months. So I'm just wanting that latitude, if you will, similar to what we did with the Lou project at the end of last year. As you recall, we did something similar. I came to you at this point. We still had some things to negotiate. And of course, I came back and reported to you that we did not expend all the funds that you had authorized me. But while you let that digest a little bit, I do want to point out a couple of things, some before and afters. I've got 3 slides. On the left is the before, on the right is the after. I will point out that's not a photographic anomaly, the one on the left. Yes, you can see through that. Structurally sound, but as Dallas often refers to as the dental concrete piece of it, needed some, as an example, some substantial work there. Again, the before photo to the left, the after to the right. Notice the enhanced sign there, enhanced signage. And one of my favorites, because I walk by this often, is, and I think I've shown this to you before, this is Charles Street. And the left gives you a side-by-side, a real, very actual, if you will, before and after. And of course, the finished product off to the right. So lots of work being done here. And we're in the throes of completing that. It's been a very good project. And that's my summary, Madam Chair. I can go on all day about this guy.
Okay,
All right.
all right. And when are we anticipating that the work is going to be complete?
So substantial completion mid to end of April-ish
Okay,
is what we're anticipating.
All
And
right.
Dallas is back there shaking his head, so he hasn't changed his mind since yesterday,
okay.
which is a good sign.
All right, questions. James?
Rich, can you just refresh my memories? Have we authorized prior contract amendments on this project? Or have we just discussed it?
Not on the construction contract. We have not authorized prior amendments.
Okay, we've authorized prior amendments on other elements of this project.
So for the construction management contract was the one that we did back in October.
Okay, other questions? Sarah?
I just have a practical question about the bridge rebuild here. I'm curious, did Fredericksburg also benefit from some improved conditions for the pedestrian access underneath? It's not related to the action item, but I'm just curious seeing these photos.
Well,
Like,
so there is some work in these sidewalk areas underneath the the bridge areas. I don't have a picture of it. But one of the elements of this project, and I'll make sure I get you a visual, or we'll invite everybody down for a ribbon cutting or something. And but one of the elements here was we did add to the east side platform. We did add stairs from the platform that will now drop folks off. We'll drop them down to the FAMPO, or behind the FAMPO GWRC building there. And so that was a safety enhancement. So instead of having people cross across Caroline Street there, that they don't have to do that now. They can drop right to that parking lot. Unfortunately, I have a picture of that at this point. So I think that answers your question. Yes, there was some enhancements there for just pedestrians in and around this project.
well, seeing as we have a project like this pending in Alexandria in the future, I was just curious, like in the rebuild, it looks a little better in the photo, a little wider, but I'm not sure if that's just the paint and the lighting, but to the extent, yeah, it became a safer pedestrian experience. I think that's great.
Any other questions? Mike?
So this might be selfish, but there might not be other riders or board members who might have the same question. So I'm one of those people that might have my headphones in when we have an office in Alexandria right now, and there's a Fredericksburg station because you have the Amtrak and you use VRE, and I'll take VRE coming back. My headphones in, and I'll be an announcement saying if you're in a front car, you need to move back one. Will all cars be able to open when this is complete, or will I still have to be weird and run back?
So to answer your question, so we are able to rehabilitate a previously used, I say previously, probably decades ago, because it was so deteriorated. Nobody was using that currently. So we did add 120 feet to both sides. We will be able to get, instead of opening 5 cars, we can open up 7 cars on this platform. And the other key thing too, and it's not an advantage just for VRE, but Amtrak as well. This was a short platform for Amtrak as well. So there's some enhancement there.
That's a great benefit, because otherwise the train might have to dwell a little longer, because the conductors are nice. If they see you running, obviously they're not going to leave you on the train. So that's going to be a great benefit. So thank you.
Any other questions? Jana?
Comment. Actually, I was up here up there last weekend, just like walking it, and it looks so much better. So I just wanted to say, as a Fredericksburg person, that it really does, and you can see that where the extension is that Mr. McLaughlin was talking.
Right.
Yeah, this structure is very, very old. Even if you were walking on that sidewalk to the right, I mean, the sidewalk was all very dilapidated. It wasn't one of those where you could be looking at something else. You had to really watch where your feet were walking. So great improvements here. And I love the stairs that come down into the FAMPO lot. I mean, that really made a lot of sense. So, you know, I asked Rich on our pre-meeting the other day, some of these additional questions about Fredericksburg and the additional expenses, because I was like, wait, share a little bit more information with me about that. So we're excited about this project being complete for the whole region. So with that, without any other questions, do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Stork, how do you vote?
Sorry, aye.
Okay, Supervisor Stork votes aye. Okay, that was a motion that carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll go on to item C, authorization to issue a GEC and 8 task order for final design services for Franconia and Springfield station improvements. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Specifically, this request is a task order with HDR Engineering, as Madam Chair stated, for final design services for the Franconia Springfield Station improvement for the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency not to exceed $355,300. So this recommended task order is to take the current design from 90% to 100%, and then of course package together all the biddable documents so we can go to procurement for construction. Just a note, just with all of our projects in this corridor, and specifically this project, as we get to the northern part of our service area, very important that we have been coordinating with all of our partners, including VPRA, CSX, and others. We're at that point now where VPRA has a 3rd track project going in there, and then just south of there, there's the Franconia Springfield bypass project. So there's a lot going on in that area, and timing wise, this is, well, the timing's perfect, if you will. If there was to be perfect to get final design completed and get out there and get this project let for construction. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions for Rich? Okay, do I have a motion?
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, Supervisor Stork. That carries unanimously. Anybody voting against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item D, authorization to extend the lease agreement for parking at the Ripon VRE station. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, this authorizations or recommendation or request specifically is with the developer firm out there in the amount or a specific amount for $197,000 and $197,042. Bless you, by the way, for 1 year. And I'm going to say, as you recall, we have through a proper arrangement with the county over the years, we have leased this parking space, as the summary indicates, 320 parking spaces for Ripon. Just briefly, with the proffer that's out there, essentially said we lease the space, the developer would eventually come in and build a garage structure on the existing main lot, which is owned by Prince William County. As the background states, the part that at current time, if you will, it's not likely that the developer has a need nor desires to build that parking garage. So we've actually been in discussion with them about just outright purchasing this lot instead of paying an annual lease, reduce our operating costs in exchange for an outright purchase. We have been in discussions with the developer, Kettler. We've also most recently been in discussion with the Prince William County staff on this issue. And so we're, as the item states, what I'm requesting is let us go out and lease this. We'll sign up for an additional 1-year term here, but have further discussions and eventually bring a business case to you if the desire is to purchase the property outright. So, and just to make the point that if for some reason in this 1-year time frame, we work out some arrangement to purchase the property, we will not be beholden to both. We won't lease the property and own it at the same time. So just want to make that part clear as well. That's my summary, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rich. Questions for Rich? Yes, Lori.
So these are 320 parking spaces, and is that the total parking for that station then?
So the main lot is 327 spaces, I believe. So this is about half of it.
So an additional, okay.
Yeah.
And are those being utilized currently?
Yes, capacity wise, right now we're, when you combine them both together, we're about half on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it continues to tick back up. So.
Half on that second lot in addition to the first
Yeah,
lot.
well, I was just taking the entire number.
Okay.
Because I looked at it yesterday at a 647 spaces or whatever. And yesterday was a little bit of a down ridership day for us, but it was about half.
Okay.
About 300.
All right,
So.
Andrea?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This will also, just for in absence of Supervisor Franklin, it is in her district, and this will help in terms, there's a lot of revitalization that is taking place in that area. And so as we get more people in the area, this will be utilized even more. So just to let the commissioners know.
All right. Any other questions? All right, is there a motion?
So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? For the record, Supervisor Stork votes aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to our last action item, E, authorization to provide a letter of support for the City of Manassas Parks federal fiscal year 25 congressionally directed spending request for Park Central Complete Streets improvements. That was a mouthful.
Yeah,
right. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No sense of going back and reciting that recommendation because it's in the title. But just to let the Operations Board know, we were contacted last week, maybe week before, from City of Manassas Park staff requesting a letter of support, for a funding source, as stated in the summary in the background, and this effort would contribute to the existing revitalization and the town center work that's currently going on out there. And I know Ms. Mensing could speak admirably to this topic, but one thing I did want to say is that the Operations Board in the past just wants to make sure if I'm bringing these types of recommendations for letter of support, that there is a link to VRE, and I will say there's definitely a link to VRE as we're constructing a parking garage in the middle, if you will, of this town center development, stuff like that. So I just wanted to state for the Ops Board that the staff feels that there's a direct link to VRE with this recommendation, or request.
Any questions for Rich? Ms. Mensing.
Just to elaborate, right now, there's no sidewalk that goes along Manassas Drive to the VRE station. So after the train lets off and people get off, they start walking in Manassas Drive on the road. So the most important thing I think that this is going to provide is that sidewalk link for them, because it's dangerous. It's not only all the cars jetting their way home, but you've got the pedestrians who've just gotten off the train.
Wonderful. Thank you for that additional information. Any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Supervisor Stork votes aye. That's carried unanimously. All right, information items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only information item I have today is just the spending authority report, and as the last couple of months, these have been multi-pages long. We only have one this month, or for the month of January. So if you have any questions about this, glad to answer them, but that's the spending authority report, Madam Chair.
All right, any questions for Rich? All right, we do not have any closed session, and the next is our operation boards time, and I'll start with Sarah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the float in Manassas on the 9th, so hopefully I'll see some people there.
Okay,
Pass, I have to say one thing.
That's not a
I-
pass.
This second. Um, So I could write more VRE this month than ever before, actually. And every time I go off on Alexandria Station, we have to fix that station, the way people go off, on, etc. This needs. I was surprised how many people I was riding with, actually. You know, it was more than my average. So I think that it's time to think more aggressively about that.
I'll comment. The month,
Sure.
I showed you ridership for January. The month of February is obviously continues on that upward increase. So
Pass for real.
pass.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that supported doing the 18 and under free fares. I've had a lot of great feedback about that, and I don't know that I've ever heard so many people excited about VRE as I'm hearing now. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and I just wanted to again say thank you for that.
Yes.
All right, the only thing I want to say is that regarding the committees, a few of the updates, I'm back to the committees again, is James has agreed to chair the CEO Evaluation Committee, and Andrea is going to stay on that committee, and Lori Hayes has agreed to join that committee. And then Takas is going to join the Finance Committee. And were there any other additions that I missed? James?
The only thing I'll say is I think on the slide that was sent around, I was also on the nominations committee, which I'm happy to continue, but if anyone else is interested in doing that, don't feel like I'll hurt my feelings.
Okay,
It's okay.
all right. Any takers at this point? And I've already had conversations with our new board members. Yes, Mr. Gordy.
I'd be happy to help support the legislative committee as well as the finance.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so if you do have, if you want to serve, just email me. You can CC Leslie and she'll make sure that this slide with all the committees gets updated. I think that, oops. Mr. Stork, do you have any comments?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you, though, for accommodating my interest in attending the meeting and especially the Finance Committee following.
All right, absolutely. So I think what we'll do is take a 5-minute break?
yeah, give us 5.
Okay, 5-minute break, and then we'll be right back with the Finance Committee. So thank you for joining us today while on vacation, and without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Hey, we've got Mr. Stork on the line with us. Is he live now? He is live.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, Dan is chairman of this finance committee, so I'm gonna let him start. And we've got Mark and his team here. And you have, Dan, just so you know, you have a lot of representatives from the VRE board here with you today.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the ability to have this committee meeting. And I'm not sure I'm the best person to chair this. And Madam Chair, you are welcome to step in because it's harder to do that remotely than it is in person.
Okay.
So if you don't mind assuming that role at this point, I am though keenly interested in the information that I know the staff and Rich, his team has been putting together. And really that's a core reason why I'm here today is I wanted to be part of this conversation.
All right, so I'm assuming that he has a copy of.
Yes, that's
Okay.
been distributed out to everyone, and if there's anyone who didn't get a copy, we'll make sure that they get it electronically afterwards.
Okay. All right,
Ready to lead off?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So when we were at the final stage of adopting the FY25 budget back in December, we didn't give a whole lot of time to what is an important part of the budget, which is this 6-year projection. So looking at the operating and the capital budgets out through 2020, excuse me. And so this discussion today was actually prompted by Mr. Stork asking for us to dig a little more deeply into that, knowing that we are, we do still have a few years left of the pandemic relief money, but it's not going to last forever. Talking in a little more detail then about what do the next couple of years look like, and what are the strategies that we need to be looking at to sustain VRE. So I really do appreciate that Mr. Stork raised this up and asked us to talk more about it. This is not going to be like a let's dig into the minutia of a spreadsheet. That's not often terribly interesting, except maybe for me and Alex. What I want to do is sort of dig into some of the key assumptions that are sort of driving the projection, and then really sort of talk about what does that imply for the policy level discussions that we as an operations board, we as staff are going to need to have over the next couple of years. So just to go over the agenda of how I'd like to go through this, talk a little bit about sort of the overview and the purpose, highlight what about half a dozen of sort of the key assumptions that are really sort of driving the budget projection, talk about the impact if you tweak a few of those projections, how does that change things when we get out to the end of the projection period, 2030, and then talk about opportunities that we're going to have over the coming months and years to change the trajectory that is being presented here. So I think this is obviously not going to be the last discussion we have about this. And in fact, I hope it would be really just the beginning. And when we get to the end, I'm actually going to ask Joe, our government affairs head, to talk a little bit about what's happening in Richmond that I think is going to sort of impact directly what we're talking about here. So, if that all sounds good. I don't have to tell you guys this, but I mean, you guys are not passive participants in the VRE budget. It's not just, we as staff come to you and say, here, approve this. You guys really have an important role in directing us what to do. And I wanted to sort of, like we said, there are lots of assumptions that go into a budget or a forecast. We're trying to sort of boil the complexity of the real world down into a model that is a little bit more tractable. So as we talk about the forecast, I sort of have these split into like 3 buckets. Putting myself in your shoes as an operations board member, the stuff that you control directly. You tell us, yes, run 32 trains on weekdays, run 12 trains on this weekend. You tell us, yes, we want to change the structure for the fares this way and this way. And you say, yes, our jurisdiction is able to contribute this much money next year to the VRE. So those are the things that you have the direct levers over. That's kind of on one end. On the other end, in the gray box, is the stuff that we don't really control. we're operating in a market, and so we have to plan around these things. What is really the cost going to be, sort of at the unit cost level, to deliver the trains, whether that's the diesel fuel, whether that's the insurance, whatever, we have to plan around that. Macroeconomic trends, again, in terms of how often are people going to the office, what is the Washington DC region employment and population growth looking like, we have to plan around that. And, you could maybe say that the federal role is maybe tends a little bit into the green as far as the influence, but really we have to sort of take what is happening on Capitol Hill and modify our budget around both for good and for bad. So those are the two that I think are here and that we sort of talk about a lot. The ones in green in the middle, I think, can often be the most interesting, where you guys have influence, but it's not really a direct part of like passing the budget. And I think, a lot of you, have roles at your own jurisdictions in terms of land use and transportation policy. And so I think, especially when we're talking over the next couple of years about ridership and how do we continue to grow ridership, how do we continue to bring riders back, the stuff that you all are doing that's kind of like adjacent to VRE in terms of how is the land around VRE stations being used, how are people being encouraged to look at modes other than just driving their own car. Those are maybe not going to have as much of a like first order influence as what is the OMB telling employees how often they have to go to the office, but it is going to make a big influence in terms of like are your citizens going to see VRE as an option or not. And then the other one, which is probably the one that we're going to talk about the most here today, is funding for transit in general and VRE specifically at the state level in Richmond, because I think that's going to be over the next couple of years a real big discussion, and the role that you all can play in giving VRE the support that I think we're going to need there. So again, as we sort of talk through this, I'm just keeping things kind of in these buckets, and that's these things are how you can direct to make the decisions that we need to sort of stay on a sustainable trajectory. And then the other one, which is related, but is a little more specific, has a little bit more of a point on it, is how are we going to transition off of relying on the pandemic relief money that we have over to still being able to sustain the service that we have and then to grow, hopefully, with everything that's happening at the state level in terms of TRB, transforming rail and bridging. You've seen this chart a number of times. You're probably tired of me putting it up here, but we got a good amount of pandemic relief money through the 3 different tranches. Up through last year, fiscal 23. Total across the 3, it's about 270 million. And round number, we've already spent 100 million. This year and next year, it's about 70 million. So then that's another 100 million that we have left after next year, after the budget that we just approved. So just if we're thinking about the buckets of the money that way. And so the 100 million that we have yet to come is the 2 orange blocks there. And it's kind of a dual question. How do we make that orange money stretch as long as possible? And then when it is gone, how do we ensure that we're in a sustainable position? Not all of a sudden in a moment of panic and having to be rescued. So that's, again, there's this general question of how to, all these different inputs that go into the model, what can we be doing about them? And then this more pointed question of how do we make this transition? So, yeah, please.
Do you mind reminding me, is there a deadline on the CRISA funds expiration?
Not a particularly relevant one right now. The one that had a stronger deadline was the rescue plan money in the middle. That was why we moved the order there.
So while you said not right now, is there discussion on Capitol Hill about amending that?
No.
Okay.
Please don't quote me on this. I think the deadline maybe for CRISA is out beyond 20.
Okay.
So I think
The decade though, yeah, the decade. think.
Sorry.
They have a decade. I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I
thank
think
you.
we're good there. Okay. So, if you look at the budget, I'm not gonna make us look at this, don't worry, this is just for sure. This is what is in the budget document right now, beginning on page 28. If you want to go dig into it, again, a year-by-year projection, looking specifically at, how many trains are we gonna have, how many riders are we gonna have, what are the big line items in the operating budget. But what I want to do is sort of step back a tiny bit from this and focus on what I think are really sort of about a half a dozen of the key drivers in the forecast. So, I should say, this is intended to be kind of like a boring projection. Yes, it is. No, but, yeah, thank you. But no major changes, no major policy changes like at the state level or the federal level. We're not making any like heroic assumptions about what we're going to be able to do as far as like really slashing costs or something like that. We're going to continue to run out into the future what you all have approved us to run next year. What does the projection look like just to do that? And then if we need to, we can add other layers onto that, change things from there. So again, the things that you all control directly, the level of the service, the passenger fares, and the jurisdictional contribution. So we're going to maintain what we've committed to do for next year, weekday trains, Saturday trains out through this period. For the fares,
Can I ask you something? That's just for structuring and for my edification.
yeah.
The operating ratio.
Yes.
How, I see that, it oscillates a little bit. It tends higher, but it oscillates. This year's 30%, next year will be 22%, then back. What does it tell us about the financial performance of the system?
Can I put a pin in that? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that in like
Sure.
one slide.
Okay, good.
But that's a great question. Thank you.
Dan, did you hear that question from Takis?
Yes, that's definitely one of the ones I was curious about, but I understand how Mark's going to go this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. A silly one, but I assume when we talk about ridership, we're talking about paying customers. And I'm just getting at Saturdays, I anticipate usage will include a lot of non-paying
That's a
18
great-
and unders.
So the short answer would be no, this would be total riders, but then we would adjust our assumption on the average fare being paid to be
Okay.
lower to account for exactly what you're saying, kids and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a question.
No, absolutely. Okay.
Great question.
So again, this is what I would call, and you can feel free to disagree, this is what I would call a fairly non-political assumption about the jurisdictional contribution and the fares. Maintain the purchasing power that we have right now by growing them essentially with inflation over this period. That just sort of keeps things steady relative to where we are. I think, well, I'll talk a little more about that in a couple minutes. But that's what's going into the model right now. Jumping down to state contribution, again, the new dedicated money that we have coming out of the MTF. The indication that we get from the state is that that's going to grow a little bit below inflation, more like about 2%. So we're using that as a baseline input right now. I should have included on this chart, I apologize that I didn't, for Mike's benefit, assuming that we're going to continue to get the 84% reimbursement on the access fees from BPRA. Again, that's a very important part of VRE's budget. And then sort of looking at those major expense areas. Most of them are, again, in this kind of boring model, are just going to grow with inflation or a little bit above inflation, particularly things like insurance premiums, the access fees that we pay to the host railroads, the operations and maintenance contract. All of those things in the past, at least, have tended to be a little bit above CPI. And then also just, things like diesel, challenging to project. And then jumping back up a little bit, ridership. Again, absent any sort of major changes in sort of macro economy. And this ties to the work that our planners have been doing on the long range plan and the ridership work that they've been working on, getting to about 13,300 by 2030. And that's still puts us quite below where we were pre-pandemic. There are other sort of nitty or grittier assumptions, of course, go into the past, but also to pause here and just ask sort of methodologically if there are questions. Yeah, sir.
So, you know, part of sort of the sustainability initiatives in the Commonwealth is, you know, reducing greenhouse fossil fuel consumption. Has there, as part of that, has there been an effort to sort of force VRE to convert to electrical engines, vice diesel engines? Is that something that's out there that could present a massive bow wave of costs to the system that we haven't quite identified yet?
I will defer to Rich on that.
So I think the simple answer is from a prime mover or a locomotive technology standpoint, it's not there yet. And so what we're projecting in our, we have projected over time in the next 6 year, in our 6-year financial plan, is to add locomotives. We're projecting that more towards the end of the decade, a zero emission or near zero emission technology will be available to us. All signs are pointing that direction, but I could not go out and purchase a battery electric locomotive today. Just again, that technology is advanced tremendously with automobiles and stuff, but just not in the locomotive market. So it is, there are radars out there, but when it comes to battery electric technology, zero emission type stuff, to your point, it's just not there yet.
If I can add, even this transit systems cross country that have done buses, that problem with the range hadn't been as advertised, and that's been made pretty public. So I think that's one issue that even if someone were to promise in the future that, oh, this will get you the distance you want, be very.
Well, I was thinking more along the line of pantograph train, electrical extending lines out.
Well, I'm going to speak to that next. As part of our agreements with federal government, sorry, not federal, with the Amtrak and FRA and CSX and others, the catenary system you see in the Northeast Corridor, just north of Union Station, would require so much right of way that the projects that we're doing would probably double in cost, because you have to add the 25 CSX operating rules that we abide by. You have to add 25 feet from their center track to the catenary system, which means we'd have to be buying right of way up and down the corridor, which would slow down the projects and double the cost of the projects. So that is an issue that keeps coming up, and some people think that's a easy cure-all. But it's the point where it's so expensive, the cure-all is going to kill any expensive projects we have, because it's so cost prohibitive. But it's a good question. It comes up at our board meetings. It comes up when we talk to FRA and Amtrak and others. Again, the cost of putting such a long bridge and having to take more right of way in DC and Burlington and places like that would be so cost prohibitive that, and you'd be tied to court with property lawyers. This would make property lawyers happy.
I'm not advocating, I'm just trying to understand.
That's a good question. That's why I'm clear.
Yes.
To explain.
I just want to say, I mean, I love that question, but the thing that I've really had to wrap my head around, the more I understood the transit space, is that even running diesel on a train is still so much more better for the environment. Getting 6,000 people on a diesel train than all those in their car. So I feel you. I mean, I'm on, on the same page, but I'm less concerned with sort of converting, trains and even buses to some extent than getting people on to the trains and buses. I think that's the first step. And then as the revenues go up and as the ridership go up, then the money and everything else starts to flow to do the conversion. I think that's the way I'm trying to think about it.
Well, I just, when we think about electrical power, and there are those who advocate, moving everything to electrical, based upon the data centers that have been approved in Prince William and Loudoun, we're looking at 28 gigawatts of power demand. North Anna, that would be 33 North Anna power plants. So anything that we're talking about trying to convert to electrical power in the Commonwealth of Virginia is going to be absolutely stymied because of the exponential power demand of data centers within such a concentrated area. So again, I'm not looking at trying to move anything to electrical because I don't know how we get to where we're going from where we are. And we're literally looking at transmission coming as far away as the Midwest just to support data centers here in Virginia. So it's, so yeah, that would only exacerbate our problem and be walking us into a failed power grid. So yeah, I'm with you on with what you just said. So
Maybe Rich, you could elaborate a little bit on the other side of obstacles there. The double-decker containers that CSX is running freight right now and that make pantograph operations, pantograph installation more difficult because they're very high. Now that said, we don't talk a lot about the other side of electrification, which is enormous gains in efficiency. And, these are the most efficient power transmission that exists, right? So it really can, if the Swiss can, pull, equivalent freights up the Alps with full electric, then we probably could do it too, right? So, therefore, I think this is a good conversation to have on the long term for us here. The type of moving stock for the future that will be efficient and very maintenance friendly, etc., is enticing. I mean, we have to win from the electrification, but somebody else has to make the investment in that. That's the.
All good points. Thank you.
So if we take all of these drivers and we pour them into the model, and this is intended to be just sort of like continuing on, and this is, I think, Todd is getting to the question that you had, and I think that Mr. Stork wanted to talk about also. So we will see a slow, steady increase in the operating ratio or the farebox recovery ratio, depending on what you want to call it. But it's still only reaching about 33% by the time you get out to the end of the period in 20. And that is comparing to, pre-pandemic, we were always budgeting at around 52%, and we were usually achieving 53 or 54%. So still, the trend is in the right direction, but not quick enough. You're looking at utilizing all of the pandemic relief money even prior to the end of the period, so by about the middle of 8. And so then by the time you get to 2030, an operating gap, it's a little squishy because we do have money that can be used on capital or operating, but sort of using some sort of normal assumptions about how to sort of split those monies, you're looking at a gap of $25 to $30 million by the time you get to the end of the period. So I think the focus for us over the next months, years, is going to be on that. How do we identify sustainable revenues that can allow us to sustain the service and then even grow the service as we've committed to with TRV? But let's talk a little bit about what can change that projection. What's enough as we stay here to really move the needle. So just to put it, to give some context, every additional 1,000 riders that we get on a weekday, by the time we get out to 2030, is approximately about $3 million in additional passenger revenue. So suppose that we were to return to approximately 18,000 riders a day in 2030 versus the 13,000-ish that we're projecting now. So that's another 5,000 riders a day. That would be roughly another $15 million. That would jump us up to a fare box recovery of about 45%, significantly better, but it's still not going to close, the entire gap. Again, way better, but not on its own efficient. Excuse me. So I think we are going to need to look at other ways to support the operation. But let's talk then about not just ridership, not just how many people are on it, but how much are they paying? As I said, I think we can't give up purchasing power. We have to be ready to sort of regularly raise the fares as inflation goes up. And also, generally, a lot of our riders, even still in the post-pandemic world, a lot of our riders are still federal government employees. They do get the transit benefit, and the transit benefit does increase, year by year. So I don't think we want to leave that money on the table. And I don't want to imply that this fare structure that we have right now is perfect and never ought to be changed. I think we made some good tweaks in this last budget. I was really glad to hear from Ms. Gary that she's getting a positive reaction to the 18 and under. I think we do still need to look at additional improvements, tweaks, to what we're asking passengers to pay. But as we've talked about in the long range planning effort, and when we talk to the customers, the fares often are not really driving the customer's decision to ride VRE. It's how reliable is it? It's how convenient is it? What's the quality of it? It's important. I mean, how much it costs is obviously important, but there are really a lot of other reasons sort of driving their decision. And I do think we also have to keep our competitors in mind. How much does it cost to park? How much do the hot lanes cost? What are the other transit options even that people have? So I hope I don't come across as sort of overly small c conservative here, but I think fares are sort of, we just need to sort of keep on keeping on with those, and that we're not going to balance this thing on the backs of the passenger. By the same token, the jurisdictional contribution, I think at a minimum, we have to maintain the purchasing power that we have, and we have to continue to make regular increases there. I think, as we say here, and Mr. Walkinshaw, if he were here, had been the one talking about this quite a bit. We're at 18 million and change for next year. Had we continued to be increasing it with inflation over the past 4 or 5 years, we'd be at more like 22 million. We also did not really make any change to the jurisdictional contribution by the addition of the weekends. So I do think, as the CFO, and I understand that you all face different pressures than I do, obviously. As the CFO, I would like to see something above and beyond just a inflation increase, given where we are and what we're trying to do. But I absolutely understand that you guys have competing pressures that I don't. So before we go on to talk about what I think the other opportunities potentially are in terms of getting other operating revenues, and is there anything that people want to talk about in terms of?
I have a question.
Yes, Monica.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so when you say you'd like to see something above and beyond, that's very generic, what do you feel like what does that look like? And if you came and you said, hey, this is the ask, if we were to go above that, generally what would that look like?
I think I would say 2 things, and Rich, if you want to jump in with your view, please. This is just me speaking. I think getting back to the original trend that we were on, so maybe jumping back up by that $4 million number. I think we added not quite 10% 8% in terms of our level of service for adding the Saturdays. I think having the jurisdictions chip in to that, I think would be good. And then my view would be that as we have more discussions at the state level about is there going to be some other revenue coming into VRE, I guess I would expect, a demonstration by the jurisdictions that they're willing to chip in on that as well.
And for that number, what would that be on top of the 2.5% inflation?
I'm sorry, what would
that be on top of? So there was like a 2.5% inflation that was like, oh, this would be a good baseline, and then you said to go above that, and so like percentage wise.
I was just gonna say, can you just the baseline number? Can you tell us what the jurisdictional contribution is by the time we get out to 20? So it starts at 18.3.
Yeah, it's 18.3 in fiscal year 25, and we'd end up in fiscal year 30 just at the 2.5% at 20.7 million.
Okay.
So then I would say, and again, these are just numbers for discussion. I would say, add that $4-ish million back in, so then you're up at close to 25 million, and then another layer on top of that for the weekends. But again, this is, I want to be clear, this is me with the green eye shade view.
I know, I just wanted to ask, because otherwise it's just, it would be great if we got more, but I want to know what that looks like to you.
Absolutely.
So on the topic of fare recovery, I would appreciate if we compare a little bit our current post-pandemic fare recovery rate towards with other transportation systems. I mean, I want to be very honest. The most successful transportation system in terms of ridership is the WMATA bus system. It has a fare recovery of not more than 10%, last time I checked. So it is also the highest, by far, subsidized system. So and we don't even discuss anything above 25% there. It was before the pandemic at 25%. So and I see here the reasons, right? I mean, this is a constant pressure. But it also, I fear that the financial assumptions that we make behind that are still boxed in the view that this is just a better commuter system, that's a slow evolving commuter system, instead of looking at this as a more of a active transportation assets that integrates in the metropolitan transportation system and goes all the way up, which would have to shape our view for the fare recovery expectations there. Now, I'm with you. I want to be conservative. I don't want taxpayers of any jurisdiction to cover for that. I want the system to be smart and exhaust its abilities to finance itself through better service and a better offer and better presence in the first place. But I would like to see what are our comparables to others, because when we talk about this money, we have to, to understand, what else we are. We need to have some consistency in how we see through the entire.
I don't think, I'll give you my view, and then Rich, if you want to do. I don't think, on the one hand, I don't think there's anything magical about the 50% number. And I do think that getting back to that in the current environment will be very challenging. But I do think, especially as we've shifted over to VRE Mobile, I think our cost to collect for the passenger revenue is quite efficient. And I think we have a passenger base. We have, I think, a high quality, high level of service that people are willing to pay for. And we have a lot of riders, again, who do get the transit benefit. So I don't see us going in the direction of like Dash, for example. No, I think what Dash has done is terrific, but I think we need to be charging. I think it's a good question though, is like, what is the right amount? And maybe not to claim that where we are right now is perfect necessary, but I worry about leaving money on the table.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And the reason why Dash can afford to do that and Art can afford to do that is because we are on the other side, the same jurisdictions that we account for the practical benefits of that for our residents, for our businesses, for our while VRE being a trans jurisdictional asset is not afforded this kind of return. Right, we don't have a real estate piece or so that would actually directly create a positive revenue for VRE. So that the reason why I'm trying to think about that is exactly that, because this has to shape how smart we are going. Because one thing for me it's very clear, we have to increase ridership a lot, and that means the cost and accessibility of VRE for the individual rider, now a much more diverse rider, has to be improved, and at the same time not leave money on the table, right? I understand that.
I think because we have several new board members, I think it's also important to point out that the VRE master agreement is where that 50% comes from. That's not a number that Mark or I, pick at random. It is sort of in the founding document of VRE. So during the pandemic, we've had in the board action item, that we couldn't meet that, and the board proved that. But that is something that Mark and I have to consider every cycle, is that if we can't, we need to aim for that because of the master agreement. So just something for you guys to be aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if that was going to come up, because I wonder too, like at the time that was baked into VRE's model, our collective vision about transit and about the role of like public investment in transit and the collective benefits. Like I understand why it's in there, and it's actually excellent. For so long. But I wonder if there'll come a time where our just general recognition that like public investment in this, might require us to take a different view on that requirement.
I think it's a very fair comment. I mean, the environment in Northern Virginia and the broader region in '89, when this was being written and contemplated, again, Steve probably knows a lot more about this than I, that requirement was something I think that the jurisdictions wanted in there.
Yeah.
But the world has certainly changed materially since 1989, 90, 91, when that document was finalized. So certainly a fair point.
Kind of gets to just changing dynamics. We are literally seeing a population shift in Northern Virginia away from the Beltway, further south. And so how much is that kind of baked into the future estimations as more people are moving to Stafford, moving to Spotsylvania, moving up to Culpeper and even out to Winchester? I mean, West Virginia is now part of Northern Virginia. It's true that people are literally moving out. So, and how the opportunity to market the availability of these trains to people as they move out, as we know where they're going, we know where the developments are going, and as people are buying those homes, communicating, hey, this is your option for commuting into DC. Because I'm stunned that there are people in Louisa County that are commuting all the way to Quantico every day. So it's Northern Virginia is almost Richmond. So.
And we can confirm that that's happening in Stafford, and I'm sure the city too. And Lori's not here from Spotsylvania, but we're seeing it and have been for really since the pandemic.
If you look at the demographic trends, Fairfax population is declining. Prince William is just barely holding steady with maybe a 2% increase. But as you get further away, you see that the population increases, percentages going up to almost 5%. Further south on 95 you go.
I'll just add, Madam Chair, that we also recognize that in the last couple of years with our marketing outreach and stuff like that. And I can personally attest to the fact that there were times last summer that if you were sitting on your boat at Lake Anna, you were hearing on a radio station an advertisement for VRE. right? I mean, and I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, you know, Louisa County resident, but yeah, we recognize that as well. Is that, and I'm glad you mentioned Culpeper because it just is, since I've lived in the region 15 years, whatever, it just amazes me at the traffic coming up 29 and 28. I mean, it's just exponentially it's even post-pandemic now, it's crazy, if you will. So, and then I just wanted to bring up I'm not going to completely disagree with anything that you just said, but it's just something to keep in mind is that, you know, the other thing that we deal with is that we understand too that go back to I guess a little bit of a cliche, you know, that we find ourselves in a position where, you know, we need to spend money to make money, right? So it's, you know, in a perfect world here, increasing frequency of VRE trains will add ridership. I mean, that's what we hear. That's a foregone conclusion in a lot of our riders' minds, right? And if you go back to the analytics that's been done with our long range planning, the other piece there is, you know, time of travel or, you know, duration of travel. If we could, even if we're bringing folks in from longer distances, can we shrink that travel time, right? So that's where we get into on the service side, you know, the creativiness of, you know, limited expresses, you know, just kind of mixing up, you know, at the service level standpoint. Those are all things that, as we've discussed with the board over the last year or so, very, you know, very targeted, if you will. Transforming rail in Virginia will give us capacity to add those frequencies, be able to better, you know, I'll just say better manage, you know, from a limited express standpoint, just better manage to demand, if you will, you know, the time of travel and stuff like that. So those efforts, you know, will be tremendous for us, if you will, and just over this similar time period, the next couple, 2, 3, 4 years, we sort of have to walk ourselves into that, you know, with some momentum behind us, you know, a little bit of wind in our sails. But in order to do that, we've got to look at all these other elements, particularly on the expense side, you know, to just make sure that what we're doing, you know, is prudently fiscally attainable and sustainable, if you will. So lots going on here. And those are all the types of discussions that we have internally, but I think this is a good, you know, good top line discussion, if you will, on where we need to go. I'm bullish on VRE, if you don't already know. And trains are cool.
Trains are cool.
And those two things right there.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Madam Chair, if I could just
Sure.
wrap it up here and actually ask Joe to talk a little bit. This is the items identified on this slide here are similar to some points that we discussed in one of the earlier committee meetings. You know, how could we address the opportunity that we have here? And I would say the first three are really sort of VRE specific. You know, could we look to get a larger chunk of the MTF revenue, or is there a way to expand the MTF? Are there ways to meet our commitments to VPRA that currently we're doing with the EROC money, change that around to free up that money to go into the operating budget? Similarly, you know, the match that we have to make on our federal capital grants, if we could identify a different resource to do that, could that free up either your jurisdictional contribution or the money that we get from the MTF? All of those, you know, sort of like different ways to mix and match. But I think the last point here, you know, is there a new permanent revenue source that could support both the existing VRE and the new services that we want to put in place? And I think that discussion is really beginning to kick off in Richmond. So if you could just sort of give us a little bit of what's happening.
Sure. Well, let me back up for a second to make sure that everybody understands, because this is a public meeting. So if anybody's out there listening too, that these are just general ideas. almost in some cases, low-hanging fruit of ideas for where you can increase revenue. We haven't, discussed this with you guys. There's political ramifications for all of these. And we will continue to talk to you guys about where we think this can go, but ultimately you guys have to tell us, what strategy you're going to want us to take. So as I think everybody probably knows that a lot of the discussion down in Richmond this year is about WMATA funding. And there's really two tracks of discussion down there. The first is, that wasn't meant to be a train joke, is the immediate needs of WMATA. And you can throw things at me if I get any of this. The immediate needs, the this year, maybe next year type funding scenarios. Oh my God, we're going to have to, cut service in half if we don't get this amount of funding. So that discussion is going on right now, and VRE is not really part of that. However, there's also a discussion about long-term funding. There is a bill in that would do a very expansive study of how do we fund Metro and VRE. VRE is named in this bill, and other transit agencies and other areas. So that's the one we're keeping our eye on. There's going to be lots of people involved in that. Of course, there'll be like a technical committee. I certainly would expect that Mark would be involved in that technical committee. So VRE is going to be a big part of the discussion. It's not just Metro. It's Metro and VRE and other transit agencies. So, will we bring some of these ideas to the table there? Probably, after further discussion with you guys. But, we expect this to pass. I don't think there's anything right now that's holding this
No, it's
bill
passed
up.
the Senate, and so it's going to be up for consideration. It's actually budget. It's sitting as a standalone bill in the Senate, so obviously it's going to be considered by the House. The House actually has a budget amendment, different vehicles, with basically the identical thing. But can I keep going for a little bit on that? No.
Sure.
Okay. Just the intent of it again was understanding you guys are working your system plan. Our own local bus systems are also facing similar, financial challenges. And of course, yes, the big one is Metro, but a big part of this effort, and Senator Evans, who sits on NBTC, was really the champion for this, was to be thinking holistically that if there is a revenue package that would be occurring at the state level in Virginia, that revenue package for Northern Virginia should be about public transit in Northern Virginia. And yes, 80% probably could be revenue that would be going to WMATA, but it was very important to make sure that the other transit systems that are facing, honestly, very similar economic pressures, they're just a little bit different, less zeros perhaps, could be a part of that. So that's something that, and indeed there is a sort of a political committee, but then there's working groups and technical groups and all that kind of stuff. And so that's something that I've been personally very involved in working with the senator and the House. And I will say to you, as I've said to other members, such as Mr. Walkinshaw, is that insofar as my engagement on this topic has always been about VRE and WMATA and our other bus systems. WMATA seems to take up a lot of air in the room, but I just want to give you my personal commitment that, especially through the commissions, we care about all of these things. And so it's important that all of those things get considered when we're talking about a dedicated revenue source for public transit in Northern Virginia. So that's got really a 2-year time frame. There's going to be some work this year, an interim report in November, and then there'll be something else. The idea is to be queuing stuff up for the 27, potentially a new governor and a new General Assembly. So thank you for.
So just on what arguments do we have here is, clearly as we're looking at these numbers and we're talking about, we understand that if we came in and said, we want to add all this service and the jurisdictions are going to have to pay for it all, there would be a lot of jaws dropping in this room. We know that is a heavy lift for the jurisdictions, that if we're going to fully implement what we've been talking about, there is going to have to be another revenue source. And the discussions that have been had over and over again at the state level about funding in the 95 corridor in particular is, we can build more capacity in the 95 corridor, and it is going to take billions and billions and billions of dollars. And we know it's going to be right back to, level F of service in a couple of years. Whereas, it is a small percentage of that number to add additional capacity for rail in that corridor. So moving people, instead of sitting on 95, they can move through the rail corridor, whether it's on VRE or on Amtrak. So we continue to make that point that we are an asset to the entire state. We are the Virginia Railway Express, not the Northern Virginia, not the Central and Northern Virginia Railroad Express. We are an asset to the entire Commonwealth because we can make them not spend $12 billion in this quarter, and they could spread that highway money out in the entire Commonwealth by spending a small percentage of that amount on rail capacity in this quarter. So we are going to continue to make that argument. That is, I'll make that argument. Mark can talk numbers a little bit more to them and economics because that's what he does. But we will continue to fight for the idea that we are an asset, but we can't grow this asset purely on the backs of the jurisdictions.
And I think that, if I can just add, I think of all these slides that we've seen here, we can tweak and we can, look at inflation numbers and move things up and provide additional services and really be very nimble in a lot of the things that we do. But at the end of the day, this is really the most important slide here. And it kind of reminds me of, a lot of the jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth we've all been complaining about, especially those of us in, I'll say, South Northern Virginia, about school funding. And the state finally last year, the year before that, did a report and came out with the JLARC report because they haven't changed school funding since the 70s. And the whole report says how inequitable it is for everybody. But, it takes a lot of bandwidth for the state to change educational dollars. And as we always say on the VACO board, they don't have any reserves until they pay their bills in education. They don't have a surplus. But this is really the most important thing for this organization. And I'm glad that you all are looking at it holistically because it's really about transportation in the whole Commonwealth. So I think this is where we all need to get behind the legislative efforts and be a part of that conversation as much as we possibly can and poke and prod all of our delegation people as much as we can with information that we can get from you all. All right. Anybody? Yes, Mike.
One quick note, those who were especially identify alternative capital funds for VPRA, should say VPRA's capital program. I don't want y'all to think that money's going to fund our staff or anything like that. Though, of the $4 billion in projects on the 95 corridor, VRE is putting in about $200 million. That's VRE is obviously one of the, if not the main beneficiary of that. So you verbally said it correctly. Just if someone sees the sign, it's that's again VRE's contribution to. We're also contributing as well. We have 22 million of our funds in L'Enfant projects, plus another 30 million we applied for federal funds that are going to L'Enfant projects. So it's a very close relationship, and we're helping each other. So,
Appreciate that clarification. Takis, did you have something? Okay.
Madam Chair, too.
Yes, Dan.
Thank you. And this discussion has been wonderful, which is, to be honest, why I tuned in and wanted to be part of the conversation today. And I have a lot more questions, but I guess the core one, and I don't have it in front of me, is in the projections that you have here, when do you see our fare, or sorry, not, yeah, well, our average daily ridership, obviously the fare value of that reaching what it was pre-pandemic? I can't tell that quickly from here, and I wanted to get an idea. And I also would acknowledge what I see here, which is we've consistently predicted more, and we've consistently not gotten that. And I think I see there's some trend that gets us there, but I don't know how many years out that is.
So I think the question that you're asking, Mr. Stork, is, so under this baseline projection, we get to fair revenue of about $41 million in 2030, which is comparable to where we were pre-pandemic in, say, 2019.
Okay. That's a core question. And then the second thing, and I know you won't have this today, but I know I've kind of raised this sort of before. I'm just trying to understand, how do we balance what we're asking for of the riders with what we're asking for, in essence, from the jurisdictions and for the non-riders and from state and other funding sources. In the origin of VRE, and I'm sure I can talk to Sharon Bolivar and find out a lot of that, but I'm looking for you all to give maybe some more back data on this. I assume that we grew VRE by putting or having a couple base sets. I don't know if that's the right terminology. Rich always mess that up. The complexes, whatever the term you use. Consorts, maybe. How many of those we had, and when did we add additional to get to the present consort level we have today?
We've been at 32, I think, for quite some time.
Yeah, but I think what he's asked, and he's mentioned, and Mr. Storks mentioned this before, is just some historical perspective of, essentially adding seats, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, how we added seats over time. Additional trains mixed in with lengthening trains and all that.
Right, replacing the single level cars with bi-level cars.
Yeah, there's a whole history to all that. So.
And the core of that, of course, as you might expect is, or imagine, is that I'm trying to look for ways that reduce costs at some level. And I realize you only do that in chunky ways, right? You have a train, or if you eliminate a train, I assume that has some cost reductions, even though it doesn't, still it's significant fixed costs on top of that. But trying to get some better handle on what that is, because of where we're going to have to look at the next couple of years about if things don't dramatically get better, and or the jurisdictions aren't willing to subsidize significantly more. And that's what I'm trying to better understand and better consider.
Okay.
So if I hear you correctly, I think what you're asking for is kind of a lot more detailed information of where we were when we started, and those kind of a chronology of how we've made decisions over the last 30 years and what changes we've made. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's trying to inform our future, and it's only because I assume there's other ways we can look at this, I have no doubt, but there's some kind of build process to this. We decided that you needed to have 2 or 3 or whatever number of train sets and number of trips that we make. And that was done on some study or some basis. And we may need to look at doing the reverse. We may need to eliminate 1 or 2 of those two. And if so, what does that mean? Do you save just 20% of the cost, or do you save 50% of the cost if you do that? But I don't think this is sustainable the way it is, and that's what ultimately why I keep wanting to understand this better, without significant changes in subsidy and or having our riders pay more. And if there's not, frankly, if the ridership isn't growing, then even that's not going to be adequate to support the existing seats that we're running up corridor.
Okay, Mark, how, and maybe Rich, how would you anticipate getting to where the information that Mr. Stork's kind of requesting, Are you processing that in your mind?
Sure. I think I would like to do it in sort of two steps. Get him the historical information that sort of explains how we got, we had periods maybe where we were adding a lot of riders and then periods where we were adding trains, and it just sort of high level how that all played out. Let me present that, chew on that a little bit, and then I think we could go from there to talk about sort of, the unit cost of trains and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not an urgency to it, just, I just want to keep us having better understanding of what those options truly are. And hopefully we're looking for other ways to not make those changes, but I think those are things that we have to understand better, because I see a cliff unless we figure out something better. Then the last thing I had was the reasons or the rationale, the kind of the approach that was used to say we would use this much in the remaining federal funds this year and this much for the remaining federal funds next year. Do you have any kind of formula you've used to do that for the fiscal out years?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you heard Alex there. It is really sort of a gap. It's, when we've put in all the expenses and all the revenues, and how much of a gap is there left in order to achieve a balanced budget.
Okay, that's helpful too. And why do we think that we cannot charge higher rates for passengers? Is there something that we know or believe, or is it just, our own gut that says, well, if we raise this, we're going to lose this? Is there data out there? Is there something that's studies or otherwise that we can look at that says, this is where the break point is? If you charge this, you'll lose dramatically more riders.
I'll give you my initial take, and then if others want to jump in. I think in the pre-pandemic world, we possibly could have charged a little bit more. I think we had a very price insensitive customer base because of how many of them had the transit benefit. In general, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you were coming from anywhere from Quantico in or from Broad Run in, your monthly pass was entirely covered by the transit benefit. But I think in the world that we're in now, and sort of going back to what Takis was commenting on, trying to expand, the ridership base beyond just that sort of classic federal government employee with a transit benefit, that I'm worried, I think we're already viewed as a relatively high cost option, and that raising them sort of above and beyond inflation would make it harder to expand into the other markets. But
we've also looked at sort of comparative costs to other agencies. We look at that every so often, regardless. And sort of historically, VRE has been one of the most expensive, just in terms of gross cost for the riders to ride. So we do also want to be cognizant of that, for the level of service we're offering, which is Cadillac level, frankly, that's appropriate, but there are limits to that as well. So that's something we look at sort of as a baseline to evaluate where we are in terms of average fare, total cost, things like that. So
Is that analysis ever taken into account, like the cost of car ownership and operating a car and insuring a car?
I think our planners have looked at that at various points.
It's maybe a little stale, couple years old.
Yeah.
Just because those have dramatically
Well,
increased. I think it's up 13% over the last year, and it's now the average car payment's like $700 a month, I think, so.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to that.
Yeah,
That's a-
actually, probably sooner rather than later to get back to that would be, on many levels, would be a good analysis. Because frankly, we could use that to market,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
if you can map out what somebody would
Yeah.
spend even riding 3 days a week, you know what I mean, versus, or 5 days a week versus what they're gonna cost in a car, the average car payment, the average car insurance, which is way up, and then the price of gas and, routine maintenance. I have a feeling we come out ahead, plus they get lots of hours of their life back.
There's no question.
What stress.
Yeah, if they're used to the toll lanes, especially on 66, you're saving
Yeah.
$10. It's 30, you can't leave Prince William County without spending $10 on the toll lanes. I mean, it's insane just to go 8 miles, it's like $10.
10 on a good day.
On the
So-
weekdays.
So we have, when is our next finance meeting? Typically, aren't they?
June, I believe, is the
Okay, I was
next
thinking.
scheduled one, if we wanted to talk about changing that.
So I guess in kind of listening to everyone here, we'll have more information coming out of the General Assembly since we're at crossover now and know whether or not we have a budget. Some people are saying we're gonna have a budget much sooner than last year, but we'll find out, won't we? Trying to be optimistic. So with it, some of the information that people have asked for here, should we have a meeting sooner rather than later, or it's gonna take you time to come up with that additional information that's kind of been requested, and maybe we stay with the June? If you could
Why don't we, yeah. why don't we
work with
talk-
Rich
Yeah.
and we can have a discussion about that. But, I think for all of us that were on, I'm sitting here kind of going back to the time after the pandemic and the times when we met and we all had these conversations and kind of had our fingers crossed that our ridership was going to come back, right? And every time we got our CEO monthly report, we'd go to that page on the internet, on our report and go, oh, we increased by 10 riders, 20 riders. And, we're back up, we're making gains. You guys have done a tremendous amount in the marketing arena. You've done a lot of signage in our area where we never used to see signs. We've surveyed our riders and other people in the community. So you've done a lot of work to figure out where a culmination of information that we can use moving forward. But, we all still have this angst and we haven't returned as much as we all hoped and thought we would. I'm still hearing people saying, yeah, they just changed our policy and we've got to go in. But is that going to really get us to 2030? And I think the answer is no, it's not. So I look forward to these future conversations and let's just stay in this challenge together, and anything that other people come up with that you want us to research, you can reach out to me, reach out to Dan, or obviously Rich and Mark, and we'll make it happen. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Dan, for taking this time out, and thank you for everybody staying today and having this important conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Take care.
Of your
All right.
vacation.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy.
VRE to be continued.
Trains are cool.
Trains are cool.